and it helps us with a lot of our math, helps analyze a lot of the statistics that we use in analyzing what's going on Battle.net. I don't know if these guys need an introduction, but I'll do it anyway. Got David Kim, just a great player and wonderful designer who does a lot of the heavy lifting on the Balance team alongside his partner in crime, Matt Cooper. Also just a great player and a great designer. And this is the group that does most of the work. And we obviously get a lot of feedback from other folks, but this is the group that does most of the work when we talk about multiplayer in StarCraft II. So we're going to make a presentation for you guys that sort of describes some of the processes that we go through and gives you a little bit of insight into the stuff that we're looking at right now and maybe some of the things we have planned for some of our future patches. Is there anybody out there that has any questions at all about StarCraft II Multiplayer? Anybody? Just a few people? All right. So get your questions ready because we'll hopefully have a lot of time for you guys to ask us whatever you want about what we've done or what we're going to do down the road. All right. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how we balance the game. So we have a lot of different tools that we use to balance this game. We have community feedback, we have pro feedback, we have our own play experience, we have a lot of stats that we gather. But the important thing to know about these tools is that they all fundamentally fail us at some critical point. Every one of these tools at some point we thought was the promised land. We had finally found the tool that would save us, that would be the perfect answer to everything we need, and then we found out it kind of sucked. So the only trick that we've got is we have to use all of these tools together. We want multiple tools to agree about what the direction is, what we should do, and only if these tools sort of fight together as a team do we have any real hope of finding the right answer, but what we want to do in the balance of the game.
So I'm going to talk to you guys today about our first tool, and this is kind of our first line of defense, and it's you guys, it's our community. And one of the best things about this is it's hundreds of thousands of players playing millions of games. And of course, this is across all skill levels, all regions, and we get some great debates from you guys. It's really not that useful for us if we have an internal tool that tells us building battle cruisers makes your win percentage go up by 3 points, or that doesn't really tell us anything. Maybe the players making the battle cruisers have already won the game. But when we get these great debates, we can see in what situation a battle cruiser might be overpowered, against what race, how players are using it. And of course, like any good debate, you get the opposite. People arguing it's not overpowered. Here's how to beat it. And of course, like any of our tools, there's some problems. One of the biggest problems with player feedback is the loudest voice tends to win. It's not necessarily about who's right or who's wrong, and not everyone chooses to post on forums. And of course, we get a snowball effect where one player comes along, makes a thread, and a bunch of people jump on that. And by the time someone who disagrees with this or has good debate to bring to the subject, there's 20 posts in a row about how he's wrong, and he doesn't really want to get in an argument with 20 players. But you guys are great at. You're one of our best tools for finding bugs and a lot of stuff that's blatantly wrong that we can't necessarily find in our internal play testing because we don't have enough time. You guys find almost immediately, and it helps make this the best play experience we can for you guys.
Yeah, I think a good example is from the beta. We had many times where we played tens of thousands of games, right? And we had not seen a lot of the stuff that you guys literally found within like 3 hours of the beta going live.
Yeah,
I'm sitting there playing on Battle.net. I'm getting overrun by gateway pushes, and I'm like, oh my God, how did we not see this, right? And then patches were incoming almost immediately.
Okay, so the second tool that we have is pro feedback. Pros really know the game and really lead the strategies that everyone else on Battle.net follows. One example is in the IEM tournament finals, Mauro, a great Terran European player, played against Idra and beat him pretty easily using this one specific strategy of going mass barracks with mass Reapers early on. And within a couple days, all over Battle.net, we were seeing this exact same strategy, even in gold, even in platinum, and especially among the diamond level players. And because pros really know the game, they give great critical feedback. For example, Maka, one of the best players currently in the world right now, he's actually here today at BlizzCon as well. He really took his time to refine the Zealot Sentry Void Ray strategy. And he not only sent us replays, but also a very detailed explanation on when to build every unit, as well as how to use these specific units in combat when you engage the enemy. And using this feedback, we were able to make the changes to the Void Ray that, in the patch that we released last week. So the one downside to pro feedback is pros generally only favor one race because they only play one race. So pros have a difficult time judging victory or defeats. Was it because, I mean, did I win this game because I was more skillful than the other player, or was there a race imbalance? That's always the hard question for pros to ask themselves. So second downside to pro feedback is pro feedback doesn't necessarily represent all skill levels. Even though people try to follow pro strategies and execute it on their own, the level of execution is not the same, meaning we get different balance across different skill levels. And even though our focus in balancing our game is for the competitive level, we do want the game to be fair and balanced for across all levels as well.
So one of our other great tools, of course, is tournaments. We're getting a ton of these here at BlizzCon. If you guys haven't checked out the RTS stage, you really should.
They're so awesome.
We got our homage there to Fruit Dealer, the winner of the first season of the GSL. Absolutely, give it up for Fruit. So the advantage of tournament games, of course, these are great games with great players playing them. And this is the ultimate test of our balance. If there is a tiny crack in our game balance, these guys are going to drive a truck right through it, right? Everything is on the line for these guys. They've got tens of thousands of dollars on the line, their career, their pride, everything, and they've been practicing 8 to 12 hours a day for months on end. So if there's any problems, we're going to see it. We don't tend to look too much at tournament results. And that's because the skill between all these players is not necessarily even. There's no perfect matchmaking in tournaments, right? Sometimes one player just practiced a little bit harder. So I know there was a lot of concern in the community when Fruit Dealer actually won those matches because there was a feeling that Zerg needed a buff. And we actually kind of agreed with that at the time. And then Fruit Dealer went ahead and won, and we were seeing a lot of posts like, oh my God, now they're not going to do anything because they have proof that Zerg is okay. That wasn't proof, right? Fruit Dealer was on the top of his game. He had practiced. He knew everything he needed to know. I think Fruit Dealer done great with any race that he'd practiced on that day. He was top form for that matchup. So you don't know, what players also didn't show up for the match. You don't know what players were sick that day. You don't know what players maybe got unlucky in an early round and got eliminated by a matchup they weren't quite as comfortable with. There's lots of variables in tournaments. So we do look at the games, and that's a very powerful tool. But the exact results would only concern us if we saw something like, oh my God, it's just all Terran all the time. No one's even choosing the other races.
And of course, another tool we use is we play our game. We play our game a lot. And everyone who works on balance is a diamond random player, so we get to see all the matchups and all the maps. So if there's a 6-pool flavor of the week or something you guys are seeing in your games, we're probably seeing that same strategy in our games, and this is great for us. And of course, we have tons of people across Blizzard giving us feedback at all different skill levels, diamond players, bronze players, and we do focus for the esports level for the best play. But if we can fix something at a bronze level that's not going to affect esports, we'll try and do this. We want everyone to have a good experience when playing our game. But again, this is a very small sample size. Like we mentioned earlier, we had played tens of thousands of games going into the beta, but we still couldn't catch some of the warp gate or gateway rush strategies. And we need a bigger sample size to catch a lot of that stuff.
So we've taken a look at all the opinion-based tools that we use to balance our game. So now look at some concrete tools that we have. First is spreadsheets, and they're great for making simple calculations such as DPS. And in StarCraft II, not only the damage per second matters, but the damage per shot as well as how often a unit fires matters as well. And it's great to just lay out all these different numbers for every single unit in the game in order to balance our game. Another great thing about spreadsheets is that they're great for analyzing build times and costs. We don't try to equalize the costs of different tech choices, and we also don't try to make every production building needed for every one of the races symmetric, but we do try to make note of all these numbers so that the balance on these numbers can be perfect. The major downside to spreadsheets is that it actually doesn't take into account a lot of the other variables that are going on in the game, such as pathing, terrain, or strategies, or even micro. And to take these into account, we'll actually look at our other tool.
So we have a tool that's an in-game tool called Make Combat, and this is sort of a debug tool that we can use to create battles very quickly and run tests rapidly to see what's going on. And of course, what's great about this, it's in the software, so it accounts for movement, it accounts for pathing. They can account for a lot of the variables that something like a spreadsheet wouldn't use. Like we often have seen, changing something as small as a unit size, as I'm sure you all know, has a significant impact on how well that unit performs. So you can make a small tweak to the size of the Zealot, quickly use Make Combat, and see what's actually going on. And it also can account for unit costs. Like StarCraft is often balanced for cost, right? We're not balancing unit to unit. We don't care if 7 Zealots beat 7 Marines. That doesn't make any sense. The Zealots cost a lot more. So we can actually set up battles and Make Combat that allow us to test for unit cost to make sure that we're getting it right. So here's an example of Make Combat in action. You can see we're going to type in a command there. We're going to do it for cost, and we're going to speed up the game so we can watch really quickly what's going on. Those Zealots and Stalkers are going to fight those Roaches and Hydras, and as you would expect, it's not going to go very well for our Protoss brothers there. They're going to beat them down. We get a little report there at the end, how the units are left, what percentage is left, what the leftover cost is. And we'll run it again just to make sure that, yeah, this is what's happening, that's what's going on. Let's change it up. Let's put in 10 Immortals in 10 of 10 those Stalkers. Let's see how it goes. And so as you imagine, this is going much better now for the Protoss, the Immortal being so strong against the Roach. But like everything in StarCraft, a lot of these relationships are very touch and go. And so we want to run it a couple of times to make sure, and we'll run it again just to see what happens. Because of small variations in pathing and small variations in unit target acquisition, suddenly what was an absolute Protoss victory suddenly turns into a narrow Zerg victory. And these are the kinds of relationships we're looking for, because this means terrain and micro will be the deciding factor in this particular battle. So if we talk about, there we go. So Make Combat, of course, we were in love with this tool. This was the greatest tool ever made. We had it. We could just test the game 50 times an hour. We could see whatever we wanted to see, and we could prove to ourselves that everything was great. We were so happy with this. The downside of this tool, of course, is it's sometimes difficult to account for terrain. I mean, you saw that battlefield. When was the last time you were in a battlefield that was that open? Now, we do have some terrain on the debug map, but it's easy to forget to use it as a designer. And the reality is, battles are rarely that perfect. It also fails to analyze the current strategies, what we call the metagame. It fails to analyze what could actually happen in a real battle. Really? 10 Immortals and 10 Zealots? If 4 Mutalisks flew over that formation, those Protoss would be dog meat. I could convince myself with that battle that, oh, hey, look, this is easy for the Protoss. They can counter this with Immortal Zealot. And actually, when you get into a live game, it's a total disaster. This is what we found when we went into beta. We've been using this tool a lot before we went into beta, and when we got to play a lot of games against people of our own skill level, suddenly we're having lots of arguments. We would say, Make Combat says this, and I'm saying, hey, I get it. I can see what Make Combat does too, but I'm telling you, I played last night, and it doesn't work. That's not going to happen. And so the danger of Make Combat, we discovered, was it creates a false sense of security. It makes you believe you know what's going on, and instead of using the other tools, you can start to rely on it to give you proof of what you want to believe. Hey, I know, we've got the answer. It's Immortal Zealot. It's going to stop it every time. And when you get into a game, it's not going to happen. I mean, even look at that scenario I showed you. 10 Immortals. How many robotics facilities did this fictional Protoss player have to put out 10 Immortals at that stage of the game? It's just not practical. And that's why our other tools are so important and why this is just one small piece of the arsenal we use to try to understand what's going on.
And of course, we have BattleNet stats, and the great thing about this is it's everyone playing the ladder. There's a lot of players who might not post on forums, a lot of great players, but we have all their games on BattleNet. And this takes the subjectivity out of what they're doing. A lot of players, if you ask someone, how did your last 30 games go? Most players probably couldn't answer that concisely. Even internally, we'll get someone coming up to us saying, man, I can't beat Protoss as Zerg. And we'll give them some advice, and then we'll go look at their match history, and we'll notice that they actually have a 70 win percentage in that situation. And it's not that they're trying to mislead us or anything like that. It's just players tend to remember their losses a lot more. And it's really hard to think back what happened in a bunch of your last games. So let's take a look at some BattleNet stats, and this is for North America across all leagues. So Terran versus Zerg, we can see that Terrans are edging out Zerg very slightly, 51-49 in favor of the Terrans. Protoss versus Terran, 53-47 in favor of the Protoss, still a really good number for us. And Protoss versus Zerg, 51-49 in favor of the Protoss. So I mean, these numbers all look great to me. I think we're done.
It's perfect.
We can just go home, right?
What could possibly go wrong with these numbers?
Let's see.
But with every other tool that we have, this has a huge downside as well. And the main reason for this is our matchmaker. Our matchmaker does an excellent job of matching two players that are evenly skilled that will go 50-50 against each other. However, the matchmaker doesn't know where the race imbalances are, so it doesn't take this into consideration. So in order for us to use these win percentages as a balanced tool, we actually have to know what the race win percentages are for each matchup when two equal level players play and not with perfect matchmaking. So to explain how we get this actual number that we use, we have our math genius, Dr. Josh Menke.
Thanks, David. Yeah, exactly. The matchmaker is trying to make sure every player has a 50-50 win percentage, but it's also making sure every race has as close to a 50-50 win percentage as well. And so because of that, we can't really trust those raw race win percentages. So we have come up with an adjusted win percentage that accounts for the skill of the players. And not only that, we can use this to track the metagame day by day, week by week. We can know what Protoss versus Zerg looks like at the top level, at the middle, and at the bottom. And this is a great tool for us to be able to know what the current metagame really is. Now, you're probably all wondering, how is this possible? So to kind of boil this all down, we throw up the calculation here and just let you guys see that and use that whenever you want to understand how we do this.
You guys got that? Seems pretty basic, right?
I got it.
Pretty basic math, I think. Yeah.
Simple stuff.
Seriously, this is how we do it. I didn't throw on the how we handle the different levels of skill, but that'll give you guys a clear idea. Now, let's run through a simple example, though, of how we actually fit that equation there. So let's say we have two players. We've got a Zerg player and a Protoss player. Before the match, we kind of think Bob's probably the better player. We've seen him play other players. We've seen Frank play other players, so we kind of have an idea about their skill. We've also seen Zerg play against Protoss in the past, so we also have an idea that we think, in this case, that Zerg at this point is better than Protoss, slightly. So then we have those two teams play. We observed the results. We saw the Protoss player won the match. And so now we need to change what we think about the skill of both the players and the balance of the matchup.
Yeah,
so
with that cheesy Void Ray rush, too. That's terrible. That's terrible. I can't believe he did that.
Yeah, we don't take into account how he did that.
It's terrible.
So here we go. Before we thought Bob was better by about 5%, but at the end of that, we're going to slightly update that, change what we think, and now we're thinking maybe Bob is only slightly better than Frank. And before we thought Zerg had a 3% advantage over Protoss, we're going to kind of back that off a little bit now because we just saw Zerg lose a match. And we do this over millions of matches, with hundreds of thousands of players. We don't really update win percentages. We're just showing this to make it easier. It's a much more complicated system than that. But this does give a flavor of how we're able to do this and get these adjusted win percentages that give us a more realistic view of what the race balance is.
So now that we know we have to factor in skill when we're looking at our Battle.net stats, let's look at the adjusted win percentage for North America, again across all leagues. So for Terran versus Zerg, Terrans are still doing pretty close against the Zerg, 51-49. This is a really good number for us. Protoss versus Zerg, 53-47 in favor of the Protoss. Now, a number of 55, about 55-45 means there's no statistical evidence of imbalance. If that number starts going closer to 60-40, then that starts getting in our danger zone, and this is a number we definitely want to look at a little bit more. So Protoss versus Terran, what do you know? 60-40. This is definitely a number we're concerned about. So we're going to investigate this a little bit further, and we'll look at Diamond specifically in North America. So for Diamond, we have Terran versus Zerg, 49-51, still a good number. Protoss versus Zerg, 55-45. It's borderline, but we still consider this a pretty solid number. And Protoss versus Terran, you can see it's a lot better, 53-47 in favor of the Protoss. Now, this does agree with what we're seeing across all leagues, but it's a much better number. So we're still going to want to look at this a little bit further.
So before we get into the race win percentages of Korea, I just want to talk about the Korean region in general. Korea, we've seen in the past, they always lead the world in terms of strategies. So for example, we've seen in the past that highest level players in Korea always develop these strategies that, say, top American or European players tend to follow. And for example, just internally for myself as well, a lot of people come to ask me if I have a +10 APM advantage just because I'm a Korean person. And even though we haven't really scientifically proven this or anything, but Questions like these arise because there's the highest concentration of top players in Korea. So we saw in the one of the examples we saw in the beta was in Korea, during the beta at the highest levels, Zerg was dominating Protoss. However, in US or even in Europe, this was not the case. It was actually the opposite. Protoss was dominating Zerg. So we took a look at the strategies that are being used. And in Korea, the top Zerg players were using this mass spine crawler plus mass brutalist strategy against Protoss that Protoss was just unable to beat. And within a matter of a couple of weeks, we saw that American and European Zerg players were actually using the exact same strategy. And a couple of weeks after that, we saw the stats kind of align across all regions. So let's take a look at the stats for Korea across all leagues. Terran versus Zerg, Terrans have a 4% advantage, which is pretty good. Protoss versus Zerg, Protoss has a 1% advantage, which is even better. And if we take a look at Protoss versus Terran, Protoss has a 6% advantage. So this number actually agrees with what we saw in North America. But let's take a greater look at Protoss versus Terran in specific. So we've just seen that Protoss in Korea, Protoss has a 6% advantage. In North America, Protoss had a 10% advantage. But if we look specifically at Diamond Korea, which is the highest level right now, the relationship is actually flipped. Terrans have a 4% advantage over Protoss. And we think the reason for this is because top Terran Korean players are really amazing with their Stimpak kiting micro as well as multitasking medevac drops all over the place and perfectly microing all these things all together at once. But as I said before, we can't just go by our past experiences, so let's take a look at our other tools to see if that's what they say also.
So Battle.net has identified a problem for us very clearly. We can see that we're seeing Protoss dominating Terrans almost across the board, except in this one place that makes us nervous. This one place that we've seen in the past can be different, and it may change our strategies. So if we look at our other tools, and now to go to the community. Now we've got about a dozen guys, I think, all over the world, guys and gals, who are gathering feedback for us from our own websites and from languages none of us speak, right? And gathering feedback from fans, from other forums, other websites that are made by the fans, and they're bringing this to us as best they can, trying to give us a summary of kind of what people are talking about, what the most popular threads are, and what people are actually saying. So the community says that Terran is too strong. The community says we should probably nerf Marauders. This is something we've been hearing since mid-beta, that Marauders might be too powerful. Nerfing Stim, usually focused again on the Marauder, though sometimes on the Marine. Now, none of this agrees with the stats, except in that one league in Korea.
So if we look at our mid-combat tool, Marauder Stim is not overpowered. Now, you do get a lot of speed movement out of it, but the actual bonus damage you get from using Marauder Stim versus the health you pay to use it, it's very borderline. We've tried a couple small tweaks on this, and it actually, in some situations, it's actually bad to use Stim. Another situation is where Marauders against Zerg, they're very borderline. A couple small tweaks to Marauders, and Roaches start beating the Marauders. And this is not what we want. We want the Marauder to be a counter unit to the Zerg. And of course, if we go by our make combat tool, Marine Stim is one of the most broken things out there. If we went by this only, we would have to nerf Marines, and according to our play experience and what the community is saying something, I don't think this is what we want to do.
So let's take a look at what pros have to say about Protoss versus Terran. We actually asked 5 different pros, of the 5 of the best Protoss and Terran pros out there, to see what they have to say about this matchup. And the first player actually says Terran wins 80% of the time versus Protoss. The second player says TOS has no chance versus Terran. The third player disagrees by saying Templars with the energy upgrade is too much. And the fourth person says Terran has no chance versus the Phoenix plus Colossi combination. And finally, the last person says PvT feels very balanced. So 2 people have said Terran is overpowered. The other 2 players have said Protoss is overpowered. And 1 person says the balance is perfect. But it's very rare for us to get these kinds of mixed opinions. So there must be something going on besides just one strategy being overpowered or one race just dominating the other race. So let's take a look at another tool.
So this is where it gets really exciting. We think we might be in a situation where it's not down to just 1 or 2 units. It might be a large combination of factors. And depending on how you choose to play, you're having a great time in this matchup, crushing your opponent, or you're getting rolled, depending on what race you're playing. So let's look at our sort of last line of defense here. It's our personal experience. We do find Terrans to be very strong at the beginning of the game. I often get run over early on with stim timing pushes. It wrecks my day every time. I have massive amounts of nerd rage every time it happens. We do see, in many cases, the Protoss being a little strong in the endgame. If the Terrans can hold out, it seems like a combination of Colossus and maybe even more importantly, Psystorm suddenly gives Protoss an advantage. And this leads us to believe that there might be a more fundamental design problem here. That while we could maybe get to a place here pretty soon where technically they're going 50-50, all that really matters is, can the Terrans win in the first 12 minutes or not? And if they don't win, then the Protoss win. And while I suppose we could say that's 50-50 good enough, that's not the game we want to make, and I'm pretty sure that's the game, not the game you guys want to play. So that means we do have to look at this issue. We have to try to figure out exactly what the combination is that's causing our problems.
So going forward, we're definitely going to keep looking at the Protoss versus Terran matchup. We think we identified a problem between our Battle.net stats and all our other tools, so we want to keep looking at this matchup closer. And one thing we're definitely going to look at regarding this matchup is stim balance on Marines and Marauders. We do think it gives the Terran a little bit of too much of an advantage early in the game, and they're probably winning a lot of their games with this strategy. But of course, we're going to look at Psystorm balance and how it affects the late game. I know personally, once I have both High Templar upgrades, I got warp gates, I can warp anywhere across the map, I really don't have that much trouble against Terran. And we're going to look at a number of other things, Thor repair, how the SCVs can be untargetable, and as you guys keep bringing us new issues and as we notice new things in our games, we'll continue to add to our list.
Yeah, so I want to thank everybody again for all the feedback you've given us. Everybody out there who's posted, everybody out there who's never posted but has played a game has helped us at some point make some decisions on the balance. And that's it for our presentation. Let's get the questions started.
Hello. StarCraft is amazing. I love it.
Thank you, sir.
One of the things I thought was peculiar was the fact that there's no option to not play online. Do you see that coming in the future to where you'll be able to work on achievements offline, then link up to Battle.net and have the stats queue up?
It's possible, and it's something we talked about quite a bit, whether we want to do that or not. Ultimately, it let us more exposed to people hacking the achievements if they could do them offline and then log them in, but I'm not actually sure how secure we are now anyway. But it's definitely something we can look at. We obviously can play offline now, as you say, but we don't give you achievement access. But I'll take it as feedback, and we'll definitely talk about it. Thank you.
So the Mutalisk seems a little bit like...
Weak?
Well, the Thor and the Marine both hard counter the Mutalisk. And the whole reason they gave the Thor the blast damage was to counter the Mutalisk. Maybe like give the Mutalisk +3 to light. What do you think, guys, think about that?
Well, I think we feel, I mean, you guys can back me up or say whatever you want about this. I think we feel like the Mutalisk speed is his greatest asset. His ability to be pretty much wherever he wants to be and hunt whatever he wants to hunt makes him a very dangerous weapon. And we're also very nervous about any weapon that can attack air and ground. It's a very flexible weapon in any unit's arsenal. Something that moves faster than almost anything in the game and can attack air and ground is something we're definitely going to be very careful of giving too many buffs to. I think we feel pretty good about the Muta right now. You guys want to say anything on the Muta?
Yeah, because the Muta speed is so fast, and the other two units you mentioned, the Marine and the Marauder, are both very attack move friendly units. So there will be a difference at the start, I think, in using these units. But as players learn to make use of the speed advantage of the Mutalisk, we feel the balance might actually be better.
Okay.
Hi. I'd like to find out if you can tell us, when will fully customizable key bindings be added to the game, and why didn't it have them in the first place? Because I've tried the different hotkey layouts, all of them, and I think I could do better if I could set the keys up my way.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. I think we've had that feedback from a lot of players. The reason it didn't make it for the game was I mean, well, we were 6+ years in development. We didn't want to hold it any longer. And we didn't feel like customizable key bindings was a reason to delay the game. So we held that back, and we've been working on it. I've actually seen the design in progress. It is being worked on right now. There is UI currently in our internal builds where we're testing it. As you can imagine, the UI for custom key bindings is not simple. Actually, I would say it's insane. It's absolutely nuts. And our biggest fear is this giant landmine that new players will step into. They'll accidentally bind a key, and then they'll have no idea how to do anything anymore. So I've been working really hard on the design of it and on the engineering. I don't have a date for you exactly, but I can tell you it is under construction. It's actually pretty far along. I think we should have something out to you guys pretty soon.
Okay, thanks.
It's just funny that you asked that because I just released a hotkey trainer like 1 week ago. So check out for that on North America if you want to train on that. But anyway, okay. My question is slightly off topic. It's about custom maps. I know you were talking a little bit at BlizzCon 2009 about the custom map marketplace that might eventually come out and maybe premium maps and stuff like that. And I put a team together with the hopes of making the absolute best maps out there eventually when that marketplace opens up and releasing really awesome stuff.
Awesome.
And I'm just wondering if you have any more details about that, when it might be coming out. I don't want to hold you to anything that you say, just any hunches that you have.
Yeah, no, I can tell you it's not coming out in the immediate future. It's probably closer to either a patch in Heart of the Swarm or Heart of the Swarm to be the soonest we'll be able to get that out to you. There's a lot of challenges we have to get that going, but I love that you're putting a team together. And we know that the fires are burning. We know that people want it. We'll try to get to you as absolutely as soon as we can. It's one of our top priorities going forward.
Awesome, thank you very much. And also, the 10 megabyte map limit, is there a chance for that to change in the future as well?
There are many arguments. There's throwing of chairs. It's been really rough in the office over this issue. We are consuming a lot of our storage very quickly, but we'll see. It's definitely something we're always talking about. I think I have like a weekly conversation about that at this point. It's definitely a topic for us, so we'll take a look at it.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, by the way, love your guys' game. Been playing since I was a kid for original StarCraft. But what I'm kind of asking about is like the early gimmicks of the games, specifically like the proxy rush for the Protoss, as well as like the early Thor rush with like the single Thor with the repairing. How do you guys usually account for that with catching those? And it felt like it took a while for those to get fixed. I mean, do you see those come out? You try to get those fixed as possible, or does it take a while for you guys to kind of understand what's going on?
Those are some of the easiest strategies for us to fix. So when we're playtesting internally, we're more focusing on the more complicated scenarios where you have multiple bases running, what the 200 versus 200 pop armies are doing against each other, and making sure that all races can stop rushes and stuff like that. But internally, we don't try as many proxy rushes or 6-pool rushes and stuff like that because they are very easy for us to fix once we see there is a problem.
Sometimes. I agree with that 95% of the time. I think there's the occasional one. We've had some that were really touch and go because a lot of the units you use in the early game to rush are also used to block other rushes, right? And so it can get really challenging. But for the most part, I think we've been able to crank those out pretty quick. I think there was a Terran SCV rush that was actually probably our scariest one with Marines behind the SCVs. The SCV's a wall, and that led, I think it was in the late beta, led to actually a nerf on the SCV health. But at the same time, the SCV was essential to stopping some other rushes that could happen against them. Definitely, one of the challenges we have is we want those rushes to be somewhat viable. We want them to be available. We feel like that makes the game scary from the first minute you click on anything in the game into the last. A lot of games are trying to get rid of those early rushes, and they say, rushing is bad. We don't want it, right? I don't know, that's my other developer voice, I guess. But we don't like that. We want the rushing to be possible. So it's always a tough call, and we're definitely welcoming your guys' feedback, whether a particular rush is still too easy to do and still too hard to block. In many cases, it's the key of detecting it and using your workers to fight back. But it's definitely always sort of a touchy one because a lot of new players get rolled by these, and they're pretty unhappy when that happens.
And because they're such a core part of the game, we try our best to teach players how to block these rushes, and our multiplayer challenges is actually a good tool for you to use to learn to counter these rushes.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, man.
Hi, I think you guys did an awesome job balancing the game, so thank you so much, all the races. My question is very simple. I always go into a bit of a nerd rage when I get mass Hydra rushed. I play Protoss, so I'm wondering if you guys can just real quick give me some strategies. And don't say Templar, because I don't know. I have better luck against Terran, but when it comes to Zerg, I just get destroyed when I get massed Hydra.
Well, the main downside of mass Hydras, especially on the offensive, is that they're really slow, so they can't kite anything off of creep. So, did you say you're playing Protoss?
Protoss,
yeah, so even just using mass zealots with stalkers shooting, over-the-shoulder shooting, or even combined with sentries with Guardian Shield that cuts down the Hydra DPS by quite a bit, should be good enough for you. But eventually, you're going to have to get out the splash options. If the scale becomes really big, say if he brings in 50 Hydras, obviously a clumped pack of 50 Hydras is a little too much for only tier 1 units to handle. So if you don't like using Psy Storm, then maybe you can probably try using Colossi.
Yeah, Colossi aren't too bad. They work pretty well on attack move. It can be effective, especially, like you say, if he doesn't have a bunch of Corruptors out, that's also an option for you.
Thank you very much.
Hello. I love this game. It's great. You guys, and all of your history of all the Blizzard games, you're great at balancing everything. So one of my questions really is, basically as it goes to the score screen, are you ever going to expose at a more atomic level how you calculate what the scores are on that screen, or allow users to look at that data in their own replays to sort of analyze that stuff more statistically, sort of the way that you guys do with the matchmaking and stuff?
Are you talking about like your hidden rating, or are you talking about just what happens on the score screen?
Well, both things. Like whether or not, like how many units of each type you built in the game, how many units did how much damage to what in the game, things like that. So
there is not enough room in here for me to talk about that score screen. We had a lot of plans for that score screen, which just didn't make it. Again, we made decisions. Do we want to hold this game even longer, or do we want to make a better score screen? And we decided, you know, we're going to put it out with the score screen we've got, but there's a lot more we can do with the score screen. I totally agree with that feedback. And we have lots of things we sort of have in plan. We want to give you better analysis of your game. We want to provide you with some more hints as to what you could do better, try to provide you with some more intelligence that's built into the game, and like you say, give you access to some of the more fundamental numbers. Now, most of those numbers you're seeing on the screen are just for cost. So if you see a unit value that's not a specific unit value, it's just how many gas plus minerals you did. So that stuff is kind of exposed, but I agree. I think we can do better with that score screen. I think you can look for that stuff in Heart of the Swarm. That's something we're definitely be pushing forward. There has been some talk of some of that stuff making a patch, but I'm not sure. It might be more of a Heart of the Swarm kind of revision to that screen to give you a lot more details to help make you a better player. So you finish a match, you lose, you want to know, right? And right before you launch another game, you don't want to watch the replay right away. I think that's a great bit of feedback, and I totally agree with it.
I guess as a second part follow-on to that, are you ever planning on an ability to sort of see what the score screen is in a replay without having to watch through all the end to get to the score screen? So you can kind of see that as like more games all at once rather than just one at a time?
We might be able to figure something like that out. The challenge in a lot of cases with these sort of suggestions is the UI issues. How insanely crazy does our UI really look? Does it end up like kind of a WoW Raid UI where it's totally nuts, and that's not what we're going for. But I think it's a great idea. I'd love to enhance the replay feature to give you more insight into what's going on in the game. I think it's a cool suggestion.
One more thing.
Sorry, man.
Thanks. I love this game. Anyway, it's a.
Thank you, sir.
Hopefully it's a simple question, but I play mainly in Diamond Leagues. I mean, not that I'm great, I'm not pro or anything, but one thing I've noticed in 1v1 and 2v2 is that Terran and Toss, and I'm sure this has been brought up, so I'm sorry if it's been brought up before, but Terran and Toss seem to have not necessarily a great advantage, but a huge advantage with choking off at the early game. And I play mainly Zerg, that's kind of the only race I play, and I was just wondering if kind of the design for Zerg was that Zerg must out-macro their Protoss and Terran counterparts, and also is the creep kind of a complementary feature for the Zerg. They can move faster on so that they can defend a little bit better and have a slightly better. So kind of a weird question, but just wondering if that was a conscious decision for every Blizzard map to have a choke point that Zerg must out-macro and the Terran and Toss can kind of defend against the early fast rush from speedlings like that.
Yeah, so we tried to make every race as unique as possible, and in this case, as you said, we want the Terran to be the choky race, and that's why we added options such as lowering supply depots to make the walling off easier. And on the case of the Zerg, we actually made a conscious decision. For example, spine crawlers can be uprooted and be moved, but we made a conscious decision so that Zerg can't block off a choke point by making it so that the spine crawler's radius is actually smaller than the footprint, which means there's no way for spine crawlers to block off a choke point, right? So that was our goal. And in terms of maps, we tried to balance. Make the maps so that they're all balanced and fair for all different types of races that we have. And I guess having those choke points was a result of this, much more so than about what the maps wanted to be, I guess.
But I think your question, you've already answered it for us. You're totally right. I mean, our goal was to say Zerg are the swarm race. We want them to out macro. We want them to win. We wanted to see like they cheated, like they just came in with way too much garbage and just overran me. And you're also totally correct that creating those creep highways is a core part of how we were trying to set up Zerg. To be honest, we had no idea if it would work when we went to beta and even beyond. But we're pleased to see that the sort of systems we set up are working the way that we sort of thought that they would. At the end of the day, you guys it's really all in your hands now how it actually plays. But that was sort of a goal to say that Zerg at tier 2 couldn't easily push a choke point, right, that was well defended. So at that point, they would have to out macro. And then once they get to tier 3, hopefully they either have some of the tools that they need in their units or they've just got way too much stuff. And it really puts the onus on the other races to keep the pressure up.
Hi, my name's Benjamin Mughal, and good afternoon. I just have a question about the balance, and I just wanted to ask, is it going to become like World of Warcraft, where every single Tuesday we get another patch that makes one race overpowered? I mean, the Roach thing was great for some players, but for others, I can defend a choke point with 10 carriers, and the Roaches destroy one building and go straight in and kill the Nexus. You know, just because they have so much HP now. And you know, I know you guys are working hard, but I just want to know in the future.
No, I think that's a very fair question. So we've done, I think, a couple of balance patches this month, which is a little more than I think we would like, and we had a few bugs, and we did a few more patches as a result of that. We are going to slow down, and I think we've already slowed down a little bit relative to beta. Beta, I think we were just machine gunning patches out as fast as we wanted to because we could. Nobody had paid for the product yet. Everything was free, right? We didn't have a customer base that was playing the game in tournaments, even though they were in some cases. That wasn't the deal we had made with them. It's like, this is for testing. But as we go forward, we're hoping to slow that rate. Now, if we find out we got balance problems, we are not going to be chicken. And I'm gonna patch once a week if I have to get the balance to be correct. But that's not our goal. Our goal is to try to stabilize, to try to settle down. We're feeling pretty good. As we showed in the presentation, the Protoss versus Terran matchup is making us a little nervous. And that's one we're going to be looking at. But we're hoping to slow it down so that we're not hitting you so often. So I don't know exactly, but our goal is definitely not that problem. The other thing I'll say, too, is WoW has challenges that we don't even begin to have, right? WoW is balancing for PvE. They're balancing for PvP at the same time. They have a ton of classes in play. They've got tons of builds on those classes that are possible. We've intentionally kept our game a little smaller. We've kept our game to 3 races. We've kept the unit counts from 12 to 14 per race on purpose so we could do this. We could very easily provide more game. Hey, here's 5 races and 17 units per race. And then we'd probably be doing more of what you're describing, and that would, in our perspective, not be such a great gameplay experience for a game that's designed only, principally, beyond the solo campaign, to be a PvP experience. So hopefully not, but we'll see.
And just to comment on the current state of the balance, we feel the balance is very tight, and the example you brought up is actually really good because right before this last patch came out, a lot of people felt Zerg can't beat Terrans, Zerg can't beat Protoss, but we made this small tweak of making Roach range from 3 to 4, and that small change made it so that players are actually saying the opposite, especially the pro players. So that actually shows our balance is really tight, and because of that, we're only going to make small changes at this point.
Yeah, we'll be cautious going forward, unless we find out something's horrible. But assuming that doesn't happen, we're going to be a little cautious.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Excalibur Z. I made the long ladder analysis thread on Battle.net forums. I'm the multiplayer and esports MVP, and it's a pleasure to finally meet you guys. My question is, what besides the hidden matchmaking rating influences player ranking, promotion, and matchmaking?
You want to take this one, Josh?
Yeah. So I think a lot of what you've already posted is pretty... I mean, I can't come out and say everything's accurate, I guess, to put a stamp of approval on it, but it's close enough to make pretty good guesses at what's going on there. As Greg said yesterday, when you play a match, and similar to what you've seen in WoW arenas, we look at your ladder points and we compare that to that skill rating in the back end. In addition, something you may not know is, or you may have guessed at, is bonus points don't have any role at all in that update. Aside from that, we do have to do some other bits of math to look at the fact that you are in different leagues and the fact that the skill of your division actually does come into play. But other than that, you pretty much have you have enough knowledge there to understand what's going on within your division, which is where we want you to focus. In addition, as we come out with the Masters League and the Grandmasters League, something that you might think is really cool about the Masters League is so right now when you rank people across all of Diamond League, those rankings are not exactly accurate. In the Masters League, if you do that, you can trust those a lot more.
Thanks for the validation.
Hello.
Hi.
I was sitting behind you yesterday during the Huck Loner game, and I started thinking, when you guys are out here watching the games, are you guys watching it as the developers and the balancers, or are you guys trying to separate yourselves and just sit back and enjoy the game?
I'll speak for myself. I'm just trying to be a fan at that moment. If I see something horribly go wrong, I would probably switch to developer mode immediately and freak out. But other than that, I'm just screaming and cheering and enjoying the game like everybody else. What are you guys?
As a balance perspective, I think we're always kind of turned on in the sense like we're always looking for stuff that's breaking what we have going on in our heads, you know, like, oh, how's he using roaches? Like, we didn't intend that at all. But I definitely watch as a fan, and I mean, I didn't see anything go horribly wrong, so I'm pretty happy.
For me personally, I watch a lot of pro games. I not only watch all the major tournament games, but pros actually send us replays for us to watch as well. So because of that, when I'm watching these games, I'm not really surprised by the tactics they use. So I'm just watching to confirm the balance of our game.
And one quick one. When you guys are out on your...
Catch us after, man. Catch us after. We'll be right here. You catch us after. We'll do it, all right?
I think that guy's wearing a Snuggie. I'm not sure. I was going to say terrible PowerPoints, but they're not. Those are awesome PowerPoints you guys have. That's really good. My question is, and I was listening to the Protoss versus Terran balance you guys are looking at. Do you guys think the warp gate technology and how fast a TOS player gets it is somewhere you want it to be? Because I get the feeling that, and oftentimes, the Protoss can force a macro game very early and very quickly, and I don't want anybody to mess with the gate stuff because I think it's awesome. It's a unique ability, but at the same time, I'm like, man, I got to fight all that stuff again. Right. I just built 6 barracks, and I still can't keep up with 4 warp gates. Right. So I'm curious, what's your opinion on the warp gates? Are they where you want them to be?
Well, we're always trying to make everybody feel as broken as we can, right? Like, every race should feel insanely overpowered, and yet somehow it all works. So I'm hopeful that we're there. They've actually been nerfed quite a bit over the last year, I would say. So I'm hopeful, but I think they're okay. What do you guys think?
I think every race has a broken mechanic. Like, Zerg puts down a Spire, a Hydroden, and a Roach Warren, and then you're fighting 200 pop Roaches, and then 2 minutes later you're fighting 200 pop Mutas. Like, you just don't know what's coming. So I think it's actually in a pretty good spot right now.
What I'm noticing at the, especially pro level, is we're seeing less and less of all these warp-in rushes that you're speaking about. And I think the reason for this is because warp-in rush is a very different type of all-in rush that people aren't used to from StarCraft or even War 3. And top players are actually figuring out ways to counter it pretty easily. And I think eventually the skill required to master this will trickle down to the lower levels as well, and hopefully it'll be balanced for across all levels of play.
Hi. Do you think the Hunter-Seeker mixer are underused? Well, it was a very cool spell before, but now I think it cannot do any more terrible damage yet.
Oh, nice.
The Hunter-Seeker was actually a spell that was causing a lot of trouble in the late game. Terran players were actually able to just take maybe 1 or 2 expansions, lock those 2 down with mass planetary fortresses as well as mass siege tanks, and all you do is just make ravens on the offensive to trade their mana for enemy resources by just being able to kill everything, right? So because of that, we had to actually nerf it because that kind of degenerate gameplay is not what we're looking for.
Yeah.
But and at the same time, not every single spell in the game has to be generally useful in every single situation. And we feel that in specific situations, for example, if you're playing against Zerg and he makes a lot of Mutalisks, having a few Ravens casting Hunter Seeker is very useful. So we feel that as long as different abilities are very powerful in specific situations that happen on a fairly regular basis, that's a very good spot for that spell.
We're definitely not, to your point, we're definitely not saying used a lot. I don't think we're going to buff it in the immediate future because of the problems David talked about. And we're going to kind of wait and see on that one to see what the community does with it. We're often surprised by you guys when you suddenly start using something that nobody ever used before and you're doing just a ton of damage with it. So we're going to wait and see on that one. But there's no plans to buff it immediately, even though I tend to agree. It only sees uses in a couple of scenarios.
Yeah,
that's a good question.
All right, my question has to deal with the life cycle of a patch and how much leeway you give into professional gamers in order to develop new strategies. Say the roach range from 3 to 4 right before GSL. How do you give them enough time to say, okay, I'm going to change this now in order to, develop better strategies?
Well, I think the answer to that is we really need a server that's sort of separate for those guys to play on so they can choose whether they want to play the old patch or the new patch. And that's the technology we're looking to. I think it's our long-term solution. We have announced in the past what we're going to do in advance, and then it took us like a month to get that patch out. At the end of the day, this last one we kind of sprung on people, but we did have David and Matt Cooper went out there and made sure that we were looking at only the earliest versions of some of these tournaments, right? That GSL, I think, was in the earliest rounds when that one first went out.
Yeah, it was right after the preliminaries, but we were aiming for right before the preliminaries.
Right, so we missed a little bit on that one. But we're trying to get it, obviously, until we get that tournament server where people can choose which patch they want to play on, we're definitely right now just trying to target times where we'll do the least amount of damage to any major tournaments. Of course, there will come a day where there are no, I hope there will come a day, where there are no tournaments out there that there was no time for it. There's always a tournament, right? And there's always something major going on. And by that time, we better have that tournament server up and running.
In the last few patches, you've made a number of changes to both Roaches and Reapers that have almost completely killed off the early Reaper attacks against Zerg. But do you think that might have been too hasty and not given the community enough chance to really figure out strategies to counter that? Because in the recent GSL, Fruit Dealer kind of showed a lot of Zerg players that we may be playing the race wrong, and this patch, or these series of patches, may have just been too hasty. Do you feel that way?
For the Reapers change specifically, as we talked about in this presentation, our main focus is on the competitive level, but we do care about other levels as well as other game types as well. And in this case specifically, especially in team games, we are seeing that at the very highest level, Terran plus Zerg teams were almost 50% of the top teams in both US and Korea. And these teams were actually using this very specific fast mass Reaper with mass speed upgraded Zergling strategy. And if the number gets that high, if the number becomes, 50% of the teams are out there are just...
And their win ratios were insane, right? Like, these guys could not be stopped. And actually, it wasn't even just at the highest levels of play. It was a lot of levels of play. 2v2 was just being trashed, specifically by the Reaper.
And it's almost to the point where you can't play 2v2s at a high level unless you pick this combination, right? So that's why we decided to nerf the Reaper. And on the flip side, for one-on-one, we felt that there's too many opening options for the Terran before the opponents can actually scout them. For example, all these different proxies, such as Reaper proxy, double gate, double barracks, Marine, bunker rush, as well as like a fast Hellion push or even a drop, Banshees, Thor repair rush, all these options. So we actually wanted to limit these options. And because Reapers were a problem in 2s, we were actually able to hit that in 1v1 as well.
I'll also say as well, if you've watched any of the matches that have been going on the stage over there, I've seen a shocking number of Reapers today against Zerg players. So I don't know. We'll wait and see. I agree the damage was high. And we did it a little bit on purpose, knowing that we were hurting the Reaper maybe more than some of our Terran brothers and sisters would have liked. But I'm not sure the Reaper's just out yet. We're going to have to wait and see what happens.
First of all, big fan. Dustin, I love it when you cast games.
Oh, thank you, sir.
I think if the Blizzard thing doesn't work out for you, you have a career in casting.
Thank you, sir.
My question is regarding the what I perceive to be an imbalance between the Thor and Ultralisk. Both these units cost the same. Both are kind of like the end weapon for these races. But the Thor can be repaired. It can shoot air. And as far as I know, it can beat the Ultralisk one-on-one. Is this correct? I saw this on a YouTube video. And it was like three Ultralisks on 3 Thors, and the Thors won. Do you feel like there's any kind of imbalance there?
The Thors are actually supposed to win because Ultralisks are a splash unit, and we don't try to make those 2 units identical. Thors are actually are the best against heavy groups of clumped up air units, light air units such as Phoenix or Mutalisk, whereas the main role for the Ultralisk is to kill large groups of small ground units. So that's why you're seeing the difference there. And for every single unit in the game, our main focus is to try to give it a unique and specific role, and we don't try to make 2 units in different races roughly equal.
Yeah, and the other thing too is a lot of Zerg units are a little weaker ultimately than their counterparts, and that's largely because of Zerg's ability to build such a powerful economy. Zerg, in many cases, do need to engage with a larger force, maybe even a significantly larger force to be successful. And since the Zerg can also save up a huge amount of larvae, which was not the case in Brood War, you can often hit the opponent with a 200 pop army and follow it immediately with a 120 to 150 pop army, right, before he can even think about replacing his losses. And so that's sort of the strength of the Zerg. The Ultralisk doesn't need to win head-to-head against anyone. He's got 7 buddies with him. And that's what he wants to do to sort of run over the opposition.
Thank you.
We have time for about 1 or 2 more questions.
Hey guys, I love the Slayers Boxer Fruit Dealer match last night. It was awesome.
Awesome.
When I was going home, I kind of thought to myself, hey, if Boxer was maybe spawned in cross-map locations, he might have done a little bit better. I was wondering, do you take stats that are relevant to player spawn locations? And I mean, I know kind of law of large numbers, maybe it kind of works itself out, but I couldn't help but think maybe that has some impact on the metagame. What do you think?
It's a really great question. I don't know if we have those stats. I'm not certainly seeing them in my daily reports about the balance, but map balance is extremely real. Right? It's a big factor of what's going on, and we could make the game perfectly balanced, I suppose, if we picked one map and never moved it from that. But we do want this versatility and variability in gameplay, so you do have to learn different matchups, not only by race, but also by spawn position. So we do create variable maps with different balance points on them, but we are in constant watch out for maps that sort of get a little too far off the line, right, where it's a little too easy for one race to have an advantage. We've actually recently cut a couple maps from ladder play, even though we love these maps, but specifically because there was just too many imbalances with specific matchups on those matches. We swapped other maps in. So yeah, map can have a significant impact, and it's definitely one of the variables we watch when doing a lot of balance.
Yeah, we do track, in those adjusted win percentages, we track an adjusted win percentage per matchup per map. And if that goes crazy, we could take a much closer look. When we were first looking at what type of stats to gather in order to make sure the maps were fair, I worked closely with the map designers, and I asked them, do you want on location, like location-based win percentage type stuff also? And they said, you know, that might be drilling down too far, but if we got into a situation where it was obviously favoring a race, then we could drill down more.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.
That's all the time we have today. Thank you for attending the StarCraft II Multiplayer panel. Coming up here at 3 p.m. on the developer stage, we have the World of Warcraft art panel, and on the main stage we will have the Diablo 3 open Q&A.